All right. Well, welcome to another expert interview. Really excited for today's guest. We've got Michael Zeno, a good friend of mine, power networker in town, and kind of unique perspective on real estate because he's been in a lot of different seats in the residential real estate world. So I think we'll be able to have some different conversations. Let's jump straight in. Mike, why don't you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you, Devin. Love the opportunity. Like you said, you and I have been great friends for years now, and happy to do this with you. So, Michael Zeno, licensed real estate agent with Remax Professionals with the Mike Wood team. I have been in the real estate industry for 5 years now. I have done a little lending, done a little title, and now have my real estate license. So, like Devin said, I have a unique perspective because I've seen every side of the transaction. And I think it really gives me a great idea of the market, of how to really help people, and to be able to have a good overall understanding of what it takes to buy a house and help those clients get everything they need. So I appreciate it.
Love it, man. Well, thanks for taking time. I know you're busy as hell because the Mike Wood team's always on fire, and I know you're out there hustling.
Yeah, it's a crazy time out there right now. Everybody sees the market and goes, it's hot. You just must be raking in money. Everything's easy right now. And the answer is kind of right. So it's definitely a hot market, and there's a lot of people and a lot of clients that are out there looking to buy. But the amount of work per client right now, I'd say, is 10 times what it used to be because it's like 100 people showing up at a used car lot with 20 cars. There's going to be a lot of really unhappy people at the end of the day because there's not 100 cars. So the amount of work per client right now is definitely a lot more than it was a couple of years ago when the inventory was greater and the buying pool wasn't as great, and the supply demand is way out of balance right now. So it's a lot of work. So yes, it's a good market, good time to be in the business, but it's a lot of work right now.
Love it. Well, that transitions to the next question. Let's talk trends. So what are you seeing in the real estate world? Either globally, or if you want to localize it down to the Reno market, that's fine too. What are you seeing? What's trending? What should people pay attention to?
Yeah, everybody is so afraid of what happened back in, because we all went through it, 05, 06, 07. Everybody's afraid of that happening again because they are seeing the prices surpass what they were back then. And I totally get that fear because especially when you're seeing month over month, year over year gain like we have recently, you can't help but have a little PTSD and go, well, this feels like 2005, 2006. And I'd say the biggest difference between then and now is the lending laws have really changed since then. They put a lot of regulations in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. So all the people that are getting loans right now are qualifying for the loans. There are no doc loans. There are no sign on a dotted line and don't need anything else. Here's $1 million. People are qualifying for the loans that they're getting. So right there, that was a big reason why we had that issue back then. We have regulations and laws in place now that is not the case now. And the other thing I look at too is everything else, not just residential, but everything else that comes along with real estate. So you're looking at commercial spaces, you're looking at new builds, you're looking at new commercial buildings, you're looking at businesses, you're looking at vacancy rates, all those kinds of things. And none of those really point to it slowing down, which is, good and bad. It is forcing a lot of people out of the market because prices are going up so high. But talking trends, everything's good. As hard as it is to say that, because we're pricing out a lot of people. We're not an inexpensive city in Reno to live in anymore. Where you look at 5-6 years ago, people were coming over from Northern California, Sacramento area, being able to get a lot more house. We're pretty comparable right now to, not the Bay Area, but a lot of areas in Northern California where we're priced per square foot and prices are comparable now. So it's definitely been a shift. But you're not seeing a lot of standing inventory for new builds. They're still selling a lot. You're not seeing completed houses just for sale waiting with new builds. Commercial space, yeah, you have some, but some of that's due to COVID and workspaces being shifted and transitioned. But you're not seeing a lot of retail places just sitting there empty months at a time. Obviously, the vacancy rate and rental and apartments is very low. So you're seeing a lot of people there that don't want to be renting for the rest of their life. So they're looking to buy. And then you're seeing new building of construction of retail and commercial space all over the place. I mean, I know multiple places in town that are being built right now. One of them is 1 million square feet of new commercial space. So those are all good things when we're talking about the real estate trends and going the right direction. Obviously, we can't sustain this month over month, year over year growth that we have in prices, because it's just not reasonable to look at a year from now and go, hey, I gained 10% in value in my house in the last month and a half, 2 months, so that we can't look 2 years ahead from now and go, yeah, that's going to continue. But I don't see it slowing down. I see all the good things happening. Businesses coming into town. Still got a bunch of big companies that want to be in Reno, and we have a lot of people from California that are working remote now that are coming over with cash. So a little global, little local knowledge is that Reno has a lot of cash buyers, and you might think that's bad because it drives prices up, but you're not going to have, say the market does change and it does go down, you're not going to have people underwater on loans. You're not going to have people trying to get out of loans and short selling and foreclosures, because we have a lot of cash buyers, which means they have no reason to get out of the house when they've paid cash. So we're kind of protected here a little bit more than other places, I'm sure. But I know around the United States, everywhere that you talk about, Boise, you talk about Austin, Texas, you talk about Arizona, you talk about different cities around the country, agents and lenders, they're all crazy too. It's a crazy time right now in the market, and the supply demand is very imbalanced. So,
love it, man. Well, and I like all the different buckets you talked about, because you got to look at it not just as what's the price of the house. It's like, no, what's all the aspects that are impacting this, and let's break that down. And I think you're right. If we look at trends in the Reno market, it all is pretty stable. We've diversified quite a bit. We've seen medical growing, we've seen retail growing, we've got, Ranchera, we've got the Plumgate development, we've got McKenzie getting ready to put up a couple of huge commercial buildings. So, I mean, there's some cool stuff happening that on the business side has to support the residential demand. So it's good.
and we didn't even talk about like lumber costs or labor costs or anything like that, right? I mean, obviously they're very inflated right now, but I mean, it's all increasing, it's all going up. So yeah.
Cool. Well, let's talk through kind of some different types of buyers and really make sure, we provide some good takeaways and tips. So let's start with, if we're talking to maybe that person that's getting out of college, starting a career, that young professional, maybe that couple that's got the kid on the way, like, how hard is it to buy the first house? And I know, like, kind of prefacing this, I know when I bought my first house, it's because I sat down with a lender who I was out networking with, and the lender looked me in the eyes and said, why don't you own a house? And I was like, well, I can't qualify. And the lender's like, yeah, you can. And I think 31 days later, we moved into a house, right? So, like, I think there's a fear of like how hard it is for a first-time buyer. And I actually don't think that's true. What's your perspective for the first-time buyer? How do they get into a house? What input do you have to a first-time buyer?
Yeah, no, I mean, all great questions. You did it the right way, and a lot of people don't do it the right way. So a lot of people jump on Zillow, jump on realtor.com, and they start looking around and they see a house and they get all excited and they get emotional, and then they're 0% prepared to make an offer. So you did it 100% the right way, where you may reach out to a real estate agent first, and that's fine because you'll get information about the market, you get information about specific homes and how to look and how to move forward. But it really all comes down to having the buyer be prepared to move forward as quick as possible. So especially in a market like this where houses are selling in 3 days, you need to be as prepared as possible as a buyer, especially a first-time buyer, because it's scary and it's a huge purchase and you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's a hard pill to swallow when it's your first house, and the most you've ever spent on anything is a new car, which is 10% of that. So sitting down with a lender, we have great local lenders in town that have all their processors, all their business centers, everything is here in town. So we have a lot of great local lenders. And you just talk it through. I mean, have a great relationship with that lender is going to be the key part. And we'll talk about relationships a lot today, because that's something you and I value more than anything else. But having that relationship with a lender, being able to sit down with them, and them not just rattle off numbers and say, yep, here's a pre-approval letter, you're good to go. But sitting down with them and really asking the questions that you have, and the hard questions, and the, what happens if this happens? And what if I don't have 20% down? And what if I don't have the best credit score? I was a lender for 4 years, and I never told a client no. I might not have said yes, but it was never a no. It's always well, maybe the credit score is not high enough, or maybe you need a little bit more funds or more savings in the bank, or maybe you need, maybe that co-borrower you have isn't the best co-borrower, or let's try to find maybe an aunt or an uncle or a father or a mother. So it's never a no. It's always a yes, or a maybe not right now. Let's create a plan. So the fear comes from being rejected, right? That's the biggest fear. Like, I want to buy a house, but I'm afraid of this. I'm afraid I don't have a good credit score. I'm afraid I don't have enough money. I'm afraid I don't have enough income. Whatever it is, it's fear. I think that prevents people from at least even having that conversation. And that's all it needs to be, is just a conversation. So you sit down with the lender that you have a relationship with, and you just say, here's my cards. Tell me what I need to do or where I'm at. And a good lender will create a great game plan, whether it's tomorrow, 31 days, 6 months, a year, whatever it is. And they'll really create a great game plan for you to be ready. And you don't need 20% down. There are down payment assistance programs out there. So that's a great place to start, is just having that conversation. So especially first-time buyers, there's so many things that you've never even heard of, you've never even experienced in your life until you do it. And a real estate transaction is unlike anything else. So there's going to be times where you're gonna be like, I have no idea what that is or what that means. And we tend to throw out all these words like contingencies and underwriting and all that, right? And we don't realize that, if you haven't done this before, we don't really use those words a lot in normal life. So that is definitely the first step, is to find a lender. And obviously, Devin and I have a lot of great relationships with lenders. So if anybody needs a referral or needs a good, at least direction to start, Devin and I have great relationships. But that's a great start. Past that, once you get that meeting and you get everything on the table, and that lender says either yes today, yes in 30 days, yes in 6 months, whatever it is, that's when you really start finding out what exactly you want, right? And in a market like this, you can't be too picky, but that doesn't mean you just buy the first house that you see and you have to be okay with it. Really finding out what's important to you. And obviously location's important, bedrooms, size, square footage, all that's important. But you really just have to figure it out, because without really looking at homes, you might not know that's a must-have. I don't like that at all, And so seeing a couple of houses, walking through a couple of houses, and knowing that you're going to need to act quickly in a market like this, and be as flexible as possible with scheduling, viewing houses, those kinds of things. So like I said earlier, some of these houses are selling in 2 or 3 days. So if you say, well, hey, I work 9 to 5 and I can only see a house on the weekends after 3 p.m.
Good luck.
Cool. Good luck. Of course, we're going to do everything we can. And I get people have hard schedules. People have very strict life, work balance, all that, but you just need to know and be prepared going into this, that the quicker and more flexible you can be with your schedule to see a house, the better. And then having all those documents and having that pre-approval letter in hand, we can write an offer. So for us, it probably takes us 10 minutes to write an offer. So we walk a house, we have a good conversation afterwards, we figure out a good game plan. The second that the client says, all right, I'm ready, let's write an offer, we can have one submitted 10, 15 minutes later. So really just having everything ready, being confident. And obviously as a first-time buyer, it's hard to be confident, but that's why you trust us as a real estate agent. That's why you have a good relationship with the lender. Because if you have everybody behind you, we all want what's best for you. We don't want to just close a house and get you in and never talk to you again. Devin's a perfect example of we met, we did a business deal together, and then here we are 5 years later, great friends, still talking business, still talking about what's next. That's the kind of business we do, where we want to get you in a house, we want to help you, but that's not it. That's not the end goal for us, right? The end goal is the lifelong relationship that we then call you and invite you to barbecues and repeat business, repeat customer, repeat client, turns into friendship. That's the goal of a good lender and a good real estate agent. So again, going back to first-time buyers, great relationship with the lender. Know that it might not be a yes, but it's never a no. So that first step of just putting yourself out there is tough. But that really is the first step, is to just lay it out all out on the table and have the lender that is a good lender that you have a good relationship with, that's going to take care of you and say, here's what we need to do. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. It may be quick and maybe long. And then from there is just building a relationship with a great real estate agent that has your best interests. And then the house search process, again, right now is very different than it has been before. You look at 3 houses and you go, all right, which one did you like the best? We'll go after that one, and we'll lowball them and they'll counter. And it's a very different process right now, but there are still ways to present a strong offer, even if it's not all cash. We can still get you in a house for not 20% down, with not all cash. It's still possible. So even though you hear a lot of scary things about the market, just know it's still possible. So
there's so many things I love about what you said, but I really like the idea of you just got to start, right? And that was my aha moment. And I was lucky that I was out networking, and I've always kind of been open to conversations. But if you are a first-time buyer, right, no matter what your situation is, small family, you're a young professional by yourself, like, go find a lender, or like I said, we'll make introductions, but sit down with the lender and have the conversation. Figure out what your credit situation is. Figure out how much cash you're going to need. Are there rural programs, right? Like, I bought in a rural market, which gave me enough assistance that I came out of pocket on my first transaction like less than $1,000. So right. There are ways to get into houses right now. That person is going to focus on the financial side, right? But once they tell you, like, hey, yeah, you're equipped, and here's your pre-approval for 350,000, then you can come back to the realtor and say, okay, hey, here's my current situation. I can buy up to 350,000. Here's my pre-approval letter. And now you can actually start looking like, well, what can you buy for 350? And if you can't buy anything that you think suits you as a first-time buyer, maybe you have a kid on the way and you just can't find anything that's a fit. Okay, great. But at least now you validated what you can buy. You now probably have some guidance on how to scale that number up if you need to, and you've looked at the market, right? So I love that advice. And then the other advice I love is kind of that must-have list. And I think this is something, you've been in the industry, but I've heard enough friends talk about it, right? Or seen, people I know go through the process. Like, you have to have clarity in that. And, you got to understand, like, what's really important to you. Is it the yard? Is it the location? Is it, the master bath? Is it, the number of rooms or the square footage? Are you going to entertain? Are you going to have, like, you need to have that. And a good realtor will help you nail that down after a couple houses. Like, they will help you figure out, like, okay, maybe you don't have money to upgrade appliances, so it is important that you buy something that has appliances that are going to last. Or, location is primary, so maybe you sacrifice some square footage. Or, oh, by the way, you want kids. How many kids in the next 3 to 5 years? Because maybe you're not going to move up houses. So
right. And on that note, it's important to know that, say you may have 10 boxes you want checked. You're not going to find a house with all 10 boxes checked. And so as important as those must-haves are, you need to know kind of what that priority list is as well. Because like you said, if it's the yard, perfect. What can we sacrifice to make sure you get a nice big yard that might not have, the master bathtub with the jetted, that you want? So it's very important. And one of my favorite things is after showing a client a couple houses, they'll send me a house and they go, I think at this point you figured out what we like. Will we like this without even seeing it? And it's like, I love that because it's so true. I mean, after walking 3 houses, a good agent should have an idea, because if they're listening and they're paying attention, they'll say, okay, they've mentioned the bathtub in every house that we've walked. So, or they mentioned the fact that they don't like doing yard work, and the fact that this has a zero-scape backyard. They've mentioned that 3 times out of 3, those kinds of things. So it's definitely a must-have list, and then also prioritize that must-have, because you're not going to get 10 out of 10 boxes. I mean, unless your budget's 25 million, which is great, you're not going to get 10 out of 10. So.
I would say, yeah, especially as a first-time buyer, right? You got to compromise. And I think it's important you understand the reality. And again, a good lender will sit down with you and say, like, okay, cool. So you're paying X dollars, right? As a roommate, or maybe you're renting an apartment, or maybe you're already renting a house, right? If you're renting a house, that's obviously the most comparable. But you sit down and you look, and I know there's some great people putting videos out in our market about, you can go and save $300-400 a month buying,
Yep.
and even if you break even, at least you have an asset that's your own and you're paying yourself rent, so there's some creative ways to do that. I know guys who got into their first house and then rented out every room in the house because they were single. Like, okay, that's great, right? So, but at least you're now paying an asset you own, which then transitions to our next conversation, which I know we both have had the ability to move up, right? So we've been able to leverage our first purchase to buy a house and then another house that might have been outside of what we thought was possible. But because of the equity that built over time, we were able to create 20% that I don't know how hard you would have had to work to make the 20%, but it damn sure would have took a lot of work, right?
And a lot more time than the amount of time we own that house. Absolutely. And kind of touch base on that whole renting buying thing. I mean, we hear a lot of people, we hear a lot of objection of, well, I'll just rent if it's that much money, that payment's $400 more than I'm paying in rent right now, right? We'll go backwards, right? Because if you're renting a house, yeah, you may be saving money actually buying a house than renting. But say you are that apartment person paying $1,500 a month in rent, and you get pre-approved and that payment's $1,800-1,900, maybe $2,000 a month, and you're like, it's not worth it, right? You mentioned something right there, and we'll talk about this, is you gain equity, you're buying an asset, right? So a lot of people just look at it as, I don't want to spend $500 a month more than I'm paying right now. And what they're missing is the fact that every time you make that $2,000 payment, you're making money on that because you're paying down that mortgage and you're gaining equity, and you're gaining an asset that's, at least over the last 16, 15 years, has been appreciating. And you can leverage that. There's lots of different ways that you can leverage the equity that you have gained since you bought the house. Or if you are just buying a house, you make your payments, you wait a couple of years, you can use that in a lot of different ways. So you mentioned buying small, working your way up, right? The average owner, I want to say probably 10 years ago, the average owner owned a house for, I think it was 15 years. Now it's down to 9. So people are, and that still seems like a long time, but you got to think of, some people buy a house, and I think the generation, our parents, and the generation before them, they bought a house and they stayed there 50 years, 40 years, 60 years, whatever it is. We aren't really in that same mindset anymore. I mean, I know myself, I know you. I mean, we bought 4 houses in 8 years. So I brought that average way down, just me. And
well,
I know,
yeah, and I'm at what, 3 houses in 9 years, right?
Yeah. So, the two of us are working on getting that stat down, but yeah, I mean, we took advantage of, obviously, good timing in the market, buying and working our way up. And there are 2 different ways that you can look at it. And you can look at it as, I'm buying this to get in a house, to at least get my foot in. But this isn't my forever house, and I plan on being here 2 to X years, 5 years. And then the equity I get, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to roll it into the next house. That's a great way, because like you said earlier, how many years would it have taken for us to, we'll just use the word 50,000, right? 50,000 in just savings extra on top of everything else. How many years would it take you to do that? And the way the market's been, and you're buying an asset that's appreciating, we got that in 2 years, just from not doing anything extra that we were doing other than living in a house and owning the house. So there's two different ways you can look at it. You can look at it as going, this is a starter house. This isn't where I want to be forever. I want to sell it. I want to make my money, and I want to roll it into the next house. And if that, you put minimum down on that first house, you're out very little money. And then, like Devin said, I mean, you could have 20% down on your next house just from living in it for 2 years. And we say 2 years because if you sell a house, your primary residence, before 2 years, you are subject to capital gains on any gains that you make from the purchase to the sale of that house. So 2 years is kind of the minimum that we always say to stay in a house before selling it. So you live there 2 years, you make the money, you roll it in the next house, you now have, 20% down on that next house, whatever it is. You mentioned a great thing is finding roommates, right? Using the house to offset your monthly payment. I mean, if you're a single business person and you buy a 3-bedroom house, you rent a room for $600 each, that's going to take most of your monthly payment right there. So that's a great way to just be able to offset it. And obviously you can't use that for qualifying for the loan, but you can use it to offset your monthly fees and maybe add some more to that savings and reduce your monthly costs. So the way the market's been, I mean, we're so trained, and I'll talk about this a bit more, but we're so trained to look back at the history of the market and the history of real estate. And that's how we create value, and that's where we get the prices from, and that's how everything works. I mean, you look at the last 10 years of real estate, and it's been a great investment. Is it always as good as the last 10 years? No. But if you bought back in 05 and you feel like you way overpaid for a house, guess what? We're there again. You've made your money back. If you're able to hold on to that house,
And I think that's a good statement, right? We've made our money back. That was 15 years of payments, right? So yes, you made your money back, and the value of the house is equal to what it was then. And you've also paid your mortgage down 15 years, which is half. Right. So you probably have actually gained 50, 60, 100,000 in equity just on payments.
Exactly. And the interest rates are lower now than they were back then. So if you refi in the last 2 years, you probably got a much lower rate, which means your payment's even less, and you're still paying that mortgage down. I mean, so everybody is afraid, not everybody, a lot of people are afraid right now because of the prices, and they've seen what's happened over the last 2 years, but history tends to repeat itself. So I'm sure at some point we will slow down. It may dip again, but you look over the last 25 years and you're still up. So.
Well, yeah. And I think that's the idea of like, are you buying to hold? Are you buying to flip? Are you buying to move up? Maybe buying isn't right for you. Maybe you do want to travel, or you're not ready to settle down yet. Okay, that's great, right? It's not for everybody. But again, if you are a first-time buyer and you're looking at it, we just want to make sure you have some tips and some ideas. The other thing I want you to understand, and this is something I'd love to hear your feedback on, is, the importance of finding the right realtor, right? So when you go out there and you're interviewing realtors, right? What are some tips you have? Because I know that having the right realtor can make or break a whole deal. So when they're out there interviewing and, they're talking to 2 or 3 different prospective realtors, what are some questions they should ask? What should they look for that would help them find a good realtor?
Yeah, it's excellent, especially right now. I mean, I think we have 4,000 real estate agents in Reno right now, which is crazy. And we have 120 homes on the market, and so it's a lot. There's a lot of great real estate agents out there. And the questions you really want to ask, other than the normal, how long you've been doing this, what do you feel like is important? Devin and I, and I said this earlier, is it's such a relationship-based business that somebody who's really established in the area, that has a lot of great relationships, that's done a lot of business, which the Mike Wood team has been in Reno doing great business for 15 years now. We have great relationships with a lot of other real estate agents. So our big advantage is the fact that we are the #1 team in Reno. We do more business than anybody else, but we have relationships with a ton of real estate agents. And that may sound silly, like, great, okay, cool, you know other real estate agents. How does that help? Because I'm working with you, I'm not working with anybody else. And the answer is when you have 9 offers on one property, and I call the listing agent, get, hey, it's Michael. We hung out last week. We had a beer 2 weeks ago. I saw you at the rodeo, whatever it is, right? They're going to put a little bit more weight on our offer, even if it's not the best offer. It may take a little convincing. It may take a little, schmoozing, whatever you want to call it. But the fact that we have a relationship with that listing agent makes a very big difference over John Smith that didn't even call when they submitted the offer, just submitted the offer, and that was it.
So
So
let's pause there, because I think that's an amazing takeaway. You guys go do your research, right? You can go on Zillow and Realtor.com and all the other places, look at reviews, whatever. Look into the person. That's great. Look into the team, right? Because the team's critical. I think that's huge advice, right? If you've got a solo realtor, you probably got to ask some other questions, because when it comes
that was
to
going to be my next main point. There is the fact
processing,
that
right?
we have a team. We have 4 people in the office that on a drop of a pen can write up an offer, right? So if we look at a house and they're reviewing offers in 2 hours, a solo agent has to go home, has to go to the office, has to write up the offer. I make a phone call and have that offer out in 5-10 minutes, whatever it is. And the fact that we have those people in the office that are always there for support if I'm showing a house, or if I'm out of town, or if I'm doing something else, having that team to have each other's backs and to be able to be that support system is huge. So yeah, so that was in my next part. So
I love that. And talking about the relationship part, I think this is really important for people to understand. I think move up buyers probably understand a little better. First time, maybe not as much, but at a minimum, there's 2 realtors involved in a deal, and that can grow rapidly, right? Because if you've got a contingent deal where you're trying to sell your house and buy a house, then in one of my cases, I actually had one realtor sell my house and one realtor help me buy the house. And the house we were buying had a realtor representing it, and they were contingent. So there was another realtor. So we're 4 realtors
you're
in.
at 7 different professionals right there.
Yeah. And so you need the realtor who can pick up the phone and call all those people involved and say, like, hey, let's get a deal done. Here's what I'm seeing and all the different ways we can get there. They're not attacking, they're very relationship and positive. They're looking for solutions. And I think that's something you gotta look for when interviewing. And I love that you said that, because that's a part that I know for a fact. Like, the only reason my second purchase happened is because my realtor knows everybody. And he could pick the phone up and say, like, hey, we're going to get this deal done, and here's exactly what's needed. Yes or no. Right.
Right. And you brought up communication too. And that was my third part. So relationships, team, communication. That is because it is such a huge purchase. It's a huge transaction, and there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, Devin, you just mentioned 7 just real estate agents. That doesn't include the lenders for each of them. That doesn't include the title companies for each of them. I mean, so you got, in one house with 2 contingencies, you got probably 25 people that are involved just on the professional side of that transaction. So the communication has to be super clear, super key to every part of it, and having those relationships with title companies, with lenders, with other realtors is such a key, because that communication needs to be open. And having a team, again, it all ties together. Having that team, we have people that are communicating constantly with all those people. It's not just me, it's not just Mike, right? We have the other people that are sending the emails, that are getting updates, that are giving you updates, that are talking to the title companies on a daily basis to make sure they have everything they need. So, and then communicating with you and making sure, like, our job, that what it really breaks down to as a real estate agent, our job is to filter out everything of the transaction, give you the information you need, and get you to the closing table, right? I mean, that's what it really boils down to, because there's a lot of little things that happen behind the scenes between real estate agent and real estate agent and real estate agent and lender that you don't really need to know, because it'll just stress you out. and there are definitely some big stress points in buying a house. But a good real estate agent doesn't present you with the problems, they present you with solutions. So having that communication and communicating with the buyer and communicating with the lender and everything, and finding a solution rather than just telling you the problems. That is a huge key piece in it too.
I love that. And these are great. There are ways you can screen for this. Like if you go sit down with someone, you can look at like, what's their office? What's their team? How was it to book that meeting? What was their follow-up? Did they follow up with you from the meeting? Did they text you, call you, email you? Did they communicate to your preference? Did you get along with the person? I think that's critical too, because you're right. There's tons of good realtors, but like you have to actually genuinely get along with the person because you're going to talk to them a lot, you know, and those of you who may not be familiar with the real estate process, right? I mean, you've got appraisals, you have inspections, and inspections could be multiple inspections depending on the house. You've got lenders, you have a title company or two title companies, you've got a realtor or two realtors. Like there's a lot going on. So the realtor that's on your team is the person who has to be an advocate for you. And that I think is the number one advice.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, and we aren't here to give you overload you with information. We're, like I said, we're here to filter all that out and give you what you really need. And obviously getting along with the person. I mean, I've shown clients, especially nowadays, I've shown clients 15, 20 houses, and we've written 12 offers, and they've gotten frustrated and they've gotten stressed out and they've lashed out at me. And that happens. I mean, it's an emotional process because there's a lot happening, and especially when you walk a house and you fall in love with it instantly. My biggest obstacle right now is managing expectations about the real estate transaction. And it starts day one from when you start talking to the client and giving them the truth. Sometimes it sucks, sometimes it's hard, but letting them know up front what to expect. Because if I sell these outlandish expectations of, hey, we're going to find your dream home and we're going to walk this one house and we're going to get it. That's it. One house, done. Right? Not saying that's not possible, but if I say that and we see 10 houses and put in 8 offers, I really didn't do you a service. So managing those expectations up front and really giving you, sometimes it's the hard truth, sometimes it's what you need to hear, sometimes it's not what you want to hear. But the reality of the market and the process is managing those expectations up front, but then reassuring you along the process as well. I don't want you to get frustrated. We don't want you to get upset, even if it is going to happen. But the fact that we're here and we're going to spend a ton of time with you on the phone, in person. I mean, some of these walkthroughs of houses are an hour long, and we're here every step of that way with you. And we're going to look out for you. We're going to have your back. And we're going to present each time the best offer and the best situation we can for you. And at the end of the day, I mean, some people say, well, I don't want to overpay for that house. If you can go to bed that night with the offer that we submitted and you don't lose any sleep and you don't say, oh, I shouldn't have done that, that was stupid, then we're all on the same page and we all looked out for each other and we did the right thing. So
that's awesome. So let's talk about move up buyers real quick, and then we'll kind of transition. But if you're going to put your house on the market, you're going to move up. Obviously, it's a more complex purchase because usually you're going to have to live in the house that you're selling, right? And then you're going to close, and then you're going to have to move into the other house. And I know you and I both dealt with having the moving van loaded, right? And close, and then you move into the other one, and that's fine. Your realtor help you there. But I think one question that I'd love to hear an answer on, because I know it's critical, even when prices are a little high, is what are some tips to present your house as best as it can for sale?
yeah, so a lot of people are afraid to sell their house right now because they say, where am I going to go? Right? I'd love to take advantage of the values and all the equity I have, but where am I going to go? So a lot of times, because it is such a seller's market, what we've been able to do is do a rent back after close. So a lot of these move up buyers, you're selling a house, you're buying another house. Some people are having a hard time getting a contingent offer accepted. So a contingent offer is your house is in contract, but it has not closed yet, and you're putting an offer in on another house, but you can only buy that other house if your house sells. So that is a riskier option for a seller to accept because, like we talked about, sometimes it's a chain reaction where you have 3 houses that are contingent in a row, all need to sell, all need to close for the next house to sell and close. So those rent backs have been really key. 60 days is normally the max because as a lender, somebody buying a primary residence has to move in within 60 days. So that's kind of that key number for a rent back. But if you close, we'll say August 1st, you close on your house, you then have 60 days to find a house and you're now non-contingent. You're still living in a house. You're not having to pack. You're not homeless. You don't have to move anywhere. You are able to now submit non-contingent offers because your house is technically sold. You then have the cash in the bank. You're putting a large amount down. You're non-contingent. So for a move-up buyer, the biggest fear is I don't want to be homeless, right? I know I won't have any problem selling my house. I know it'll be harder to find a house. And the key is really structuring the offer that you accept from that buyer and structuring it so that it benefits you and you're not having to be stressed and you have the time that you need to. Obviously, we can look before the house is actually closed. The success rate of that is much lower than a non-contingent offer, but then you have 2 full months to find a house, move in, get that done, and then have the buyers of your house move in once you are closed on that house. So that has been a huge key lately that we've really been doing. If somebody's paying cash for your house or is an investor and it's a second home or something like that, you have more than 60 days. So that communication between your real estate agent and that buyer's real estate agent is key there because it's how you structure the offer that they're going to submit, or if you need to counter offer their offer with something that works better for you, that's going to be key. So sometimes, we structured one where the buyer paid cash and they didn't need to move in right away. And my sellers had 6 months in that house to find a house. So all that stress of being homeless went right out the window because
I love that because I think you're good advice there. And it's something maybe I didn't even think of until I was in that contingent space was, as the seller, you control what you accept, right? So if you go out and, you talk to a realtor and they give you kind of an estimate of what they think your house is worth, and you're like, look, that creates enough equity where I think there's ability to do something. Okay, right now you're back to the lender, having the conversation, making sure am I qualified, right? So same process we were in before, except now I love what you just said is like, hey, a good realtor will make sure that if you sell, you accept an offer that fits your selling situation, right? Maybe you can move right away. Maybe you're moving out of state, so it doesn't really matter. Maybe you do need cash. So, it may take you a little longer to sell, although probably not in this market, right? But even if it did, you have the ability to accept the offer. You control the situation, right?
Right.
And then that gives you the chance. So I love that advice. And I love that story of like, here's some scenarios that work if you're looking to move up. So don't have as much fear and let's just explore what's possible.
Right. And I love the way you put that because it really, again, a lot of the decisions we make are fear-based, right? We don't want to talk to a lender because we're afraid they're going to deny us, right? We don't want to sell our house because we're afraid we're going to be homeless and have nowhere to go. And it's all about surrounding yourself with people who won't put you in those type of situations, right? They're the people that you build a relationship with that has your best interest, whether it's the first time or the 10th time, right? You have to have that relationship and that trust to know that who you're working with is not going to put you in a situation where you're going to regret any decision that you make. So
awesome, man. Well, we're getting towards the end of our time. I know we're going to end up with a part 2 at some point because I know we have such good stuff to talk about. So I always like to ask a couple questions. So to finish, the first question I like to ask is, you've been in kind of a sales position for a little bit. You've done real estate, you've done relationship building. If you look back at your profession and your growth and development, what's something you wish you'd learned earlier or some advice you would give to someone who might be starting that journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've done everything from retail sales, retail management to professional sales to real estate sales. So it's all of it really is relationship based, right? Obviously you need to figure out what makes you different from everybody else. And And sometimes the answer is nothing. And so you have to figure out how to combat that, right? Like, you're selling something that everybody else is selling. So why you, or why that product, right? Um, and sometimes it's as simple as being honest and saying, you're right. Right? You can go to Joe and buy the same exact product for the same exact price. So why should you pick me? Um, so it's figuring out what that is. And for me, it is my network and my relationship focus in everything that I do. And I tell people this when I meet them for the first time, or we're, building a relationship, is I say, I am relationship based. Like, when I lie in bed at the end of the night, if I had quality time with someone that I enjoy spending time with, and I fulfilled, a relationship based, even if it's a conversation. I mean, Devin, you and I spending time right now is fulfilling me, growing our relationship. So it's a good day just because we're doing this and we're spending time together. So that to me is what sets myself aside from other people, is because that really is a focus for me. So finding what makes you feel fulfilled at the end of the day, is a huge key. How does that set you apart from everybody else? And then how can you use that to your advantage to be successful? That's kind of my key takeaways there. Something I wish I would have learned earlier, is surround yourself with people that want you to do better. And I think we get so caught up on, back to relationships, right? We get so caught up on old relationships, or family relationships, or people that you've known forever that you're comfortable around. Well, sometimes when you're comfortable, you get a little lazy, you get a little complacent, you get okay with how things are. And there's nothing wrong with being okay with where you're at if you're happy and you have what you need. But surrounding yourself with people, like, look at your group of friends list, and who's on your favorites on your cell phone, right? Look at those people and think, if I had to spend the next 5 years with these people every day, are they going to want me to do better, or am I going to be in the same exact place I am now? So I think that would be one of the big things I would change going back, is, mid-20s, going, okay, who am I hanging out with? Who am I spending time with? Who am I putting my energy into? And is that pushing me to do better, or is that just kind of keeping me where I am now?
Oh, all of yes. Yes, that all of it. Pack it
Yeah.
up. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, it is hindsight's 2020, right? And it is nice to pause and look back and go, you know what? Hey, here's some things I would have done. And anyone listening to this, like, the goal of these conversations is, if we can give you one thing, just one snippet that allows you to move forward in life, change something, pivot, take action that you were taking before, that's it. I'm done. Because if we talk about fulfillment, that's my goal, right? My goal is always to add value to everyone in every way possible. And this is just one channel for that. So again, talking to Michael right now allows me to do that and build this relationship. So I love that takeaway. I love the idea of relationships first. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for that. And that idea of who you surround yourself with, it's awesome, because, I look at our friend circle now and I definitely see that. Like, there's been moments when I've been the lowest guy in the room and I'm like scraping by, and it's like, guys, like, what's going on? And one, you can get feedback, but you also get that motivation, because on the other side, when someone does something huge, your circle will congratulate you, but then they're going to push you to figure out what's next, right? And I had a mentor that did that, right? I really wanted to buy, and I love this story, right? I really wanted to buy a Mini Cooper, and that was always my dream car. I had it on the background of my computer, and like, that was the thing, like, that was a goal for me. So I remember when I was able to do it, I went to the dealership, I bought it. It was just an awesome moment, right? It's that moment where you're like, you know what, I've earned the money and the ability to do this. And I did, and I had a business then. It was great. I remember calling my mentor and saying, hey, check out what I just did. Like, it's so epic. I'm sending pictures, and they were very supportive. And I remember the very end of the call, he said, that's cool, but what's next? And I mean, like, I'm like ecstatic, right? And then all of a
What do
sudden,
you mean? This is it.
yeah, he's like, well, yeah, but what's next? And like, that moment sits with me so hard where it's like, you can't just settle or that's where you're going to end up, right? And inertia is either going to push you forward or backwards. Inertia doesn't, never going to stay. So if you settle, you have to go backwards. So, dude, such good advice there.
And don't get that confused with being greedy or not being happy with what you have, right? Because there's a big difference between those two. I talk about this all the time. Is if nothing changed for me moving forward, I'm happy and I have everything I need.
Contentment versus chasing goals. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
But do I want more for myself and my family and my life and my career? Absolutely. Is there anything wrong with that? Not at all. But it's not greed that drives you. It's bettering yourself and bettering your surroundings. Actually, just this morning, I watched a video of LeBron James, and he was talking about how you have this group, and then you succeed, and they're either happy for you or they're jealous, right? And if they envy you, they're going to be like, "Man, you changed." And his response was like, "Damn right, I changed. Like, you haven't. What's wrong with you? I've changed because I've bettered myself and I'm moving forward." And it just, you hear it 100 times, but just hearing it just different ways just kind of makes you smile and laugh. You hang out with people you hung out in high school and they're like, "Man, you changed."
Yeah, I hope.
Right. They say that as a negative, but if you look at it yourself, it's like, yeah, absolutely. So,
that's awesome. So one book, podcast, video you think people should read, listen to that inspired you?
Oh man. I am terrible at reading books. So I have a long list of books I need and should read, but let's see. I might have to get back to you on that. Podcasts. I mean, I listen to Joe Rogan podcasts constantly, and I listen to things that I would never normally listen to because it makes me think differently. So I listen.
And I think that's phenomenal advice right there. Is like, just be okay just listening to stuff that's different. Get a different echo chamber, right? Especially with social right now, we've all created our own news feed that matches what we want to see and hear.
Right.
And so I think that is fine.
A lot of it's the same, right? A lot of it may be, push your business, grow your business, do this, do that, do that. And then I pop on a podcast and they're talking about ancient Egyptians.
It's something different, right? Keeps your mind.
It grows my knowledge, it grows my brain, and it's a little break from the everyday grind, but it's still, to me, it's fascinating information. I listened to another one that was talking about early childhood education and how social media affects teenagers. I'm a parent, you're a parent, so it's a different form of information that we're not used to, but it's amazing because it's out of our norm and it's out of our, push business, sell. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. So.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time, guys. Below this video will be links and contact information for Michael so you can get a hold of him. He is relationship based, so I'm sure he'd be happy to hop on a Zoom, get on the phone, grab coffee, beer, or he is an avid golfer. So if you want to book a tee time, he'll go out with you. Just be ready because he's pretty good. So yeah, all his contact information will be below this video. Michael, thank you for taking the time, brother. I always appreciate you. And
I appreciate you, Devin. Thank you.
And with that, we'll wrap up our Friday and we'll go hustle.
Cool, buddy. Have a great day.
Thanks, brother.